Should I use that as trivia today?
And we're live. We're live.
Do it. All right.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Toque Talk.
Hey, guys.
Oh, more cowbell. Yeah, always bring a cowbell. Nothing more annoying than being at the hocky game when the some old lady's banging on a cowbell.
Oh yeah,
right next to your head.
You gotta love it.
Yeah, right next to your head. Yeah.
Old lady. I love it.
But some like really like super.
So here we are, week 7. I know.
Holy.
It seems like just yesterday. We were week 1. How's everybody doing?
Great.
Awesome.
Same.
Fantastic.
Brent Fitz is in. It's 1973. He's not only calling from Winnipeg, but he's also calling from a time machine. But
I know. I called Wayne and Garth and I said, "Can I do my show from your basement?" It's actually a nightmare. It's my parents' basement.
So this is your parents' basement, and you're supposed to be cleaning it out to get out of the house, but it seems like you're actually moving back in with all that stuff behind you.
Yeah,
just give us some backstory though, because it sounds like you're getting kicked out of your parents' house, which is actually a better story than what's actually happening.
But yeah, I am quarantined, guys, so I haven't left the house, and this will be like the second week already.
Wow.
So I'm actually having fun in the basement because I'm going through boxes, but I'm opening drawers and I'm finding old Star Wars stuff. So
Nice.
pretty rad.
Yeah.
What is that, like a model or what was
Whoa.
These are the models. Remember these?
it? Yeah, of course, yeah.
And then
You don't want
puzzles.
those. Let me take those off your hands. You don't want those.
You don't want those.
I'll bring them back and I'll gift them to everybody. Okay.
Nice.
And then when we get back, we're playing this.
Whoa.
I remember that.
Nice.
Wow.
The X-Wing. Anyway, I feel like it's 1978 in my basement.
always will
because
be.
it is.
What's the radio? The
Yeah.
radio? What's that behind you?
Radio?
Well, that's a modern thing. It's just to play vinyl. But I have a bunch of old Sony stuff that I just packed up and ready to go. 8-track, bringing it down to Vegas. So when you're ready, Todd, we're going to have a little Keitel retrospective, and we'll have to sit around and listen to all the Keitel.
Do you actually
tracks.
have Keitel 8 tracks?
Well, of course.
Keitel was, just so anybody's listening, it was a Canadian company from Winnipeg, right?
Yeah.
That
And so-
actually would compile like a greatest hits package. So as kids, we all had Disco Rocket.
Well, and a lot of the people watching
Goofy
might
Greats.
be
Goofy
familiar
Greats.
with the first
Goofy Greats
first
was the
promo
best.
video we did, which was a take on the Keitel commercials, as well as the
Exactly.
K
Exactly right.
EH Keitel records that we use on the back of the CDs. Yeah, so
Right.
Yeah.
But the K in Keitel was for somebody's name, right, Brent?
Kivis.
What?
Family from Winnipeg. Kivis.
Okay.
Kevin.
They still exist, apparently,
Yeah.
but nothing to do with
So-
music anymore, I don't think.
it's funny
found
because
some
record sales
Keitel
are on the up.
Razor,
I don't understand
like-
why they. Yeah, true.
Well, vinyl is.
So Brent, I see you're wearing the Jets jersey, and I didn't have time to listen to the entire news feed, but I saw that just before we went live, Gary Bettman was on announcing that there is going to be completion to the 2019 season, and we're vying for, I guess, cities. Winnipeg is out of the loop, but I see that Vegas and Vancouver and Toronto are all still in the loop for rinks. So there will be hockey, and it's just a matter of when and I guess how they pursue.
Well, we talked to Sheldon
Yeah.
a couple weeks ago or whatever, and he was talking about finishing the season as well. Sheldon from the
I imagine there's
Chicago
just too much
Blackhawks.
money left on the table, when these players are negotiating bonuses and, such based on their performance, they've got to complete it somehow. So, but yeah, so it has been announced that it is going to happen, and it might be end of summer. So
Okay.
yeah, it is. I mean,
That's exciting.
What's your take on that?
It's good news.
Or have you
I'm
lost
surprised.
have you lost the
I thought
thunder? Are
maybe-
you still kind of hoping to see some hockey, or is it kind of now just let's go on with summer and wait for next year?
and all the other sports that
Oh,
don't
I
matter.
know.
Come on, Darren.
I'm just
Get in the game.
just trying to be objective.
The worst is to
Yeah.
watch television right now. Netflix is great, but regular TV, like you can't watch a sports channel because there's nothing new
Yeah.
to watch. So it's been depressing. So yeah,
I've been
sports.
following darts
Especially
like you wouldn't
Just
believe.
they're just
Yeah.
Really?
180, 140.
It's just amazing. The only action you get is when the guy doesn't get the bullseye. Like that's what I don't understand. So
yeah.
So there's not going to be any audiences. They're just going to just play the game and just film it. What about all trash talk?
We don't know. There might be some sort of social distancing. There was some discussion of figuring out how to kill this row, but then that row is there, but every second seat or every third seat or something. It's very bizarre, very bizarre times. That's for sure. The concert situation, once they get that sorted out, can you imagine playing a venue that we're only allowed to have half the people in it? The whole point of a rock and roll show is to have as many sweaty people up against each other as possible. It's going to be very unusual.
Then we have a good excuse for our shows.
Exactly.
It's sold out online.
It's it was sold out, but we can only let so many people in. COVID, man.
Exactly.
No.
Yeah, perfect. Like a 300 capacity is suddenly 150. I could do that, no problem.
Well, I think with the NHL, considering they're only going to use a few arenas, that's the other thing too. I mean, they're going to probably go with, I guess, whatever works best from a majority standpoint, because I imagine they're going after the television, ratings more than anything at this point. But yeah, well,
sure. Well,
I thought maybe Winnipeg would be considered because of I don't think there's been some COVID cases in several days here now, and it's been.
Well, I think they took a vote, and more players
are
were willing to take COVID rather than come to Winnipeg. So they, I guess,
Yeah.
That's why it's tough always to be a Winnipeg Jets fan, right, Darren?
But no, I mean, in all seriousness, though, True North actually took the wind right out of our sails, because they had announced that a couple weeks ago that they were terminating all remaining home games. So we knew we were out of the loop even before the NHL even announced it. So yeah, but I guess like anything, we'll take it however we can get it. So
just to be clear, Darren and Brent are both in Winnipeg. Corey and Shane are both in Los Angeles, and I'm in Las Vegas. So this is a very international show today.
Really
it's
is.
always international because we generally talk to Canadians.
Speaking of talking to Canadians, we've got our first guest on deck, and
we do on Devil's Deck. Write it down.
Zinger.
That was quick.
Todd, you want to do the honors?
Devil. Yeah, absolutely. This guy is not only is he a legend, but he's an amazing dude, and he's been really great to me. And a massive fan, coming up, young guys coming up in Canada, these guys, and actually one of those bands that when you're in the States or in Europe, and he's one of the band names that come up when you go, oh, you're from Canada? Coney Hatch. It always comes up. In fact, we get more heat about not doing a Coney Hatch song than almost any other. Even more than Triumph, we get more heat about not doing a Coney Hatch song, so we must. And he's an amazing guy. He's been working with Rush forever, and he's got a bunch of other things on his plate too. So please welcome to Toque Talk Tuesdays at 2, Mr. Andy Curran. Yeah.
What?
Shit.
What is that?
That's a vintage Bobby Hull, baby. Vintage Bobby Hull.
Fantastic.
Hey Andy, you know Brent Fitz has gone ice fishing with Bobby Hull.
Oh, I'm super jealous about that.
True story.
Yeah.
You can share Bobby, though, because he's such a strong Blackhawk. A lot of Americans will be like, well, he was never a Winnipeg Jet. We don't have to argue over that, but he did have a great legacy in Winnipeg from this era, actually.
Yeah.
So here I can add.
I love Brent's sweater, and that's pretty awesome. And the fact that you guys had Dustin Byfuglien, and I'm pretty sad about that whole chapter. I don't know what's going to go on there. But first, let me say thank you for having me on, because I'm a big fan of Toque. And I last time I saw you guys was at the Juno Awards. And I love what you're doing. You're flying the Canadian flag high. And I think it's great you're all separated around the world. And when Darren first called me, he said, we're going to talk about Canadian rock. And I was like, hell yeah, we are.
I think
So awesome.
Somebody has to name their next album "Ice Fishing with Bobby Hull." So I'd like to.
Okay,
I think
well, there you go.
It's the most Canadian thing that could be said in this entire thing.
And I'm going to go on record as saying I was going to wear my toque.
There you go.
Right? But
Chicago
it's a little hot here in Burlington right now, so I just thought I'd kick the baseball cap. But hockey and rock and roll for Canadian boys, what else is there other than women in cars? I know there's women in cars.
So, Andy, you were sitting in on that little
Thank you.
bit we talked about at the beginning, and obviously with hockey coming back, what's your take on that? You just as excited, not as excited, or somewhere in the middle?
Well, no, I'm super excited about hockey coming back. I not only am I an avid fan, as you guys know, I'm a diehard Blackhawk fan. I actually skate 3 or 4 times a week still. I've been playing hockey since I was 5 years old. So not only have I been robbed from watching hockey, I can't get my yayas out on the ice, right? But so I'm super excited about that. But I want to talk about Keitel, because you guys brought Keitel up, and Corey mentioned that he wasn't too sure if they were still around anymore. The guy that founded it, his daughter Samantha, I actually met her through a mutual friend, and she is carrying the Keitel flag with mini pops. So she is the whole mini pops thing. So like father, like daughter. Samantha Kives is been doing mini pops for about the last, I think maybe a decade or longer. And when I was over at Anthem, when Anthem Records was bought by Olay, they said to me, we should go out there and get some more catalogs, some Canadian record, labels. Let's go and buy everything. Because Robert Ott was like that guy. Like, I've got a giant dowry of money. Let's go buy some labels. And I was like, wow, what about Keitel?
Yeah.
He's like, yes.
Amazing.
Awesome.
So we approached Keitel. They weren't ready at that time. I believe I can't remember the founder's name, but he had passed away. But we all grew up on it. We were talking about Dave Grohl. Apparently Dave Grohl said that his introduction to rock and roll was buying a Keitel record and hearing Frankenstein for the first time. And he was in, right? What? So we talk about 20 pop explosions, and we can see those covers, and they did the Pocket Fisherman, they did that's right, the hamburger stacker thing. Like, he had all those merchandising things.
Super Slat of Snow Skates,
right? All of that. Snow skates. So as Canadian boys, we were like, it didn't matter. Yeah, it started in Winnipeg, but I can see those Keitel commercials.
Absolutely.
Like,
Does anybody know, did the Hunky Bill, was that done under Keitel, or was that just a solo thing, Brent? You'd know that. That was a Winnipeg guy that came up with the Hunky Bill pierogi maker.
Well, just if only you and I know about it, which I do,
Dude,
of course.
That sounds like an SCTV sketch right there.
Okay.
The
You've never heard of it?
pierogi maker?
Well, then everybody's got to go Google that after the fact, and they're great commercials.
Okay. Well, the Pocket Fisherman was Paul Popeil's Pocket Fisherman, a fishing rod that was like that long. That was pretty rad.
I remember that plain as day,
Yeah.
Keitel Records was definitely the gateway drug for a lot of people for rock and roll and for pop music. First time I heard Magic Man by Heart or any of those classic rock songs was all on a Keitel record,
Yeah, and one last interesting thing, because we're all music guys on this, that I'll share with you. When I was talking to the Keitel camp, one of the interesting things that happened, and the founder of Keitel was such a pioneer, when he did those compilation records, and might be the first guy that ever did compilations. When you think about, your compilations now are on a playlist, right? But he was one of the pioneers of giving you one record with a bunch of different artists. But he was able to secure the copyright and the rights to use those in perpetuity. So to this day, he can still put out Chubby Checker, do the twist. There's Elton John songs on there. Sure. And you guys have all been in bands, so when you do a deal now, those publishing companies, you can't hold the rights to that for perpetuity. They'll give it to you for 6 months or something. So that's what's enabled Keitel to go along until today, where they still have the rights to release those records. And if you did some Googling, you'd find out that they're still distributing those songs, which they have a duo. So if Sony Music has a song, so does Keitel, if they just happen to cut that deal back then. So that guy was an entrepreneur. Yeah.
Absolutely. Wow. That's insane.
When we were on the Slash tour, we were on the back of the bus coming up with every song that was on the Goofy Greats album. Wasn't that Keitel? Flying Purple People Eater and Itsy Bitsy Teeny Wee and Yellow Polka Dot Bikini.
The Red Baron was probably on
that. That was the
first track.
Absolutely, There you
Yeah,
go.
I'm just looking now. 1975.
Wow.
Goofy Greats was 75.
1975.
Dang. Let's talk about that shirt, Andy.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
that's
he's
a pretty
wearing.
sweet shirt.
For anybody that
Stompin'
doesn't know
Tom.
who Stompin' Tom is, you should Google it immediately. Stompin' Tom was the king of Canadian. I guess he started as kind of a folk country singer, really. I'm not really sure what you would classify him as, but
Yeah. Yeah, there's, I had to, going back to when Anthem Records was purchased by Olay, one of the things that the founder said was, hey, we should go out and get some catalogs like I told you guys. And I happened to know that the Stompin' Tom catalog was coming up for renewal. And I said, what about Stompin' Tom? And he was like, oh my God, are you kidding me? Like, you can't get any more Canadian than the guy that wrote the hockey song and Bud the Spud and Big Joe Mufferon, all these songs, right? So
biggest man in Ottawa was Mufferon Joe.
Right? So anyway, so I had to do a quick study on him and learn a lot of stuff before I met Tom Jr. So Tom Jr. is in charge of the estate when Tom passed away. And Tom is about 6 foot. I'm going to say he's about 6'5". He's built like a brick shit house. Whoa. He's a defenseman. So we hit it off right away, started talking about hockey. And he's a chip off the old block. He's like, well, I like you guys. Your company's Canadian there. And I think my dad would like it. And so, and so.
Is he back east as well?
No, he lives just north of Milton with his mom, Lena, the widow, right? Gotcha. And some really interesting things came up. A lot of people don't know that Tom had his own record label. That he started Boot Records and he signed Leona Boyd. Go figure. Wow. You're like, wait a second. So this guy's like this shit-kicking, stomping guy that's like badass, and he signs Leona Boyd for Boot Records, right? But he was staunchly Canadian and proud of it. The only acts he would sign were Canadians. Stompin' Tom's kid claims that Johnny Cash came to Toronto, saw Stompin' Tom at the Horseshoe, went back and started dressing in black and taking his image and all that kind of stuff. Now, this is Tom Jr.'s story, right?
Interesting.
And he and they also signed Katie Lang. And so Katie Lang, he told me that Stompin' Tom and KD had a falling out. And I said, well, wait a sec, he signed her to the label. What was the falling out about? And he said, well, my dad didn't like the border jumpers, those Canadians that go south of the border when they get it all good here in Canada. And then they jump. And so there was this thing about if you're Canadian, stay in Canada, right? But the best story I can tell you that you may or may not know, the year the Juno Awards decided that they were going to make a best international release, Stompin' Tom went crazy.
Really?
He called up the Juno committee and he said, unless you get rid of that category, I'm giving every one of my Juno Awards back. This is about Canada. And so they basically said, yeah, thanks for coming out. He took every one of his Juno Awards and brought them back and never had a single thing to do with the Junos after that.
Wow.
And they said, call me once you've gotten rid of that category. Wow. That's how Canadian this guy was. So amazing. I learned some amazing stuff about him. And I talked to Dean Cameron when he was alive at EMI and all the guys at EMI. And if you went and hung out with Tom at his house, and or went on the tour bus or anything, there was a prerequisite that you could not leave until Tom finished drinking, and that could be 4 a.m. So, and if you dare try to leave, like apparently the wrath of Stompin' Tom, how dare you get up at my party, right? So I think the drinking caught up to him. He was a hard-living guy, but you're right,
lived
Todd.
To be fairly old. How old was he when he finally passed away?
I'm going to say in his 70s. I should know that. Yeah. But he really was super patriotic. And anytime I hung out with his son, it would just rub off you. It would ooze off you. You'd be like, yeah, man, I'm Canadian. Damn right. And it was all about Canada. I had a great time working with Tom Jr. He was awesome.
Hey, Andy, tell everybody that don't know why he's called Stompin' Tom.
Yeah, there's a lot we have international viewers, so you might want to.
Yeah,
Listen back.
and his career started off as Tom Connors, and then he got this reputation. And Todd, you were correct. When he started, he was solo without a band, and he would have those sort of half cowboy boot cut. They were like a motorcycle boot.
Sure, yeah.
And he'd be slamming the beat on with his right or left foot on the ground. Yeah. And apparently what happened was he would do it so hard and so loud that he started to cave in these stages all around Canada, right? So he started taking a board with him, and he brought these boards, and he would bring them to his gigs. Like part of his setup would be to bring these boards, and in later years he would sign them and auction them off. And in some of his records, he would cut this board up into these tiny little pieces like that big, and you buy the new Stompin' Tom CD with a piece of his stomping board in there. So when he became known as Stompin' Tom, he changed the name because everybody was like, oh yeah, I saw Stompin' Tom Connors, and then he put and then it became a trademark, right? He actually has a son. Oh man, this is so bad that I can't remember this. He's got a son from his first marriage that is out there playing songs, and he sounds identical to him.
Really?
I'm having a brain fart now. I should know this. I should Google it. But his he has two sons, Tom Jr. And his eldest son that is out there playing. And if you close your eyes, you're like, oh my God, this guy sounds like Stompin' Tom. But it was all about smashing the boot on the ground.
Well, he's got an amazing catalog. Like when they would do these late night commercials in the 90s, he did some sort of greatest hits package, and every single song was like a slam dunk, like as far as the Canadianism of it, for sure. Yeah, it's probably something to kind of go and
they're still doing them with
into.
now commercials today. I saw just one recently with Hockey Mom, and they're doing for all the car companies, and yeah.
I just had a friend of mine at Anthem Records text me that it's Taw Connors, spelled Taw Connors. And do yourself a favor and listen to a video and close your eyes, because that voice is so unique and recognizable. And Taw is like a chip off the old block. But the last thing I'll tell you on Stompin' Tom, because we could spend a whole freaking show on this guy, right? Exactly. When we were started to do these re-releases, and we went back in his catalog, and we thought, wouldn't it be cool to get Canadian artists to cut some of his songs? And I said, well, why don't we go after Dave Grohl? Because Dave Grohl went on NPR radio and said that Stompin' Tom Connors was punk as fuck, and then Vice magazine did a show about him, or an article on him. It's amazing. It's amazing to think about people outside of Canada that realize what a rebel he was. And when you talk about punk rock, they were talking about him giving away his Juno Awards. Like, who the hell does that, right? It's just it's the attitude, right?
People always say they're going to do something like that, but nobody ever does that. No. I'm going to give this damn thing back. And it's like, no. And he drove over and I just imagine he personally probably delivered those awards too.
In his pickup truck, I'm sure he had it. No, he had a Suburban. He had a Suburban, which he used to. So he refused to drive on the tour bus. He would follow the tour bus in his Suburban with tons of 2.4s in the back, smoking his fool head off, right? I mean, this guy was a real rebel.
That's the real deal, isn't it?
Yeah, I picture him the same way. You remember George Costanza, driving around the parking lot with the trophy tied behind the back of his car, dragging it around in the parking lot.
Exactly.
World Series trophy,
Exactly.
Hey, Darren, I sent you a picture of when my band opened up for Stompin' Tom back in the late 80s.
Oh, my God. Wow.
Or maybe early 90s.
What was that, Moose Jaw? Or in Vancouver?
No, we were out in Ontario somewhere, like Kitchener or someplace like that.
Makes sense.
And Corey, did you get to meet him or talk to him or anything?
Briefly, just to say hi, but we didn't get to really talk. He didn't show up till right before, because he really didn't have a band or anything. He just goes out.
Can you show the picture? Because we're not going to see it.
Yeah.
Oh, what's that?
Because can you
share your screen?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah.
It's what was I gonna say? Did you stay at his party till 4 a.m. or did you bitch out and leave?
Oh, nice,
dude. That's next level.
Wow. That's so awesome.
That's so cool.
I wish I would have met him. If
that was me.
Nice.
Back in the day.
I thought you were the guy with the rock lid on the other side, man.
No, that's Mike Norman. Okay. We talked about him last show.
Well,
Mike Reno.
let's talk about Coney Hatch now, because we got Eddie Trunk coming on here and later on. He's paired up because he's one of the international American friends. He's one of those guys. But he's a massive Coney Hatch fan, as you know. So I want to make sure we touch base on that. I of course have been like down this rabbit hole the whole week because I knew you were coming on. So going back and really digging into that stuff, man, it's like Carl Dixon, his voice was just so amazing, and you guys just had such a thing and such a sound, and then Monkey Bars is such a signature tune. When you're kind of like, you got Carl Dixon, who's like this, he just has that voice, and all of a sudden the bass player steps up and kind of steals the show with because that was always my favorite song, was Monkey Bars had like a punk rock vibe to it or something.
Yeah. Well, thanks for saying that, dude. And we had a nice long run from 82 to 85, and then a huge long hiatus. And then we kind of got, a friend of mine passed away in the early 2000s from spinal meningitis. And we got together and did a fundraiser to get some money to fly him home to England. And then we all separated. And the cool thing about the Hatchers is we all, through thick and thin, we had some pretty good battles, and some of them even erupting into fist fights at certain times. But it's stuff that you do with your brothers, right? Yeah. Like I have 3 brothers, and we had fist fights daily. So if you can't, but you still love them, right? Yeah. And then Carl was playing with different bands throughout the different Coney Hatch hiatuses. And then recently we did a deal with, like 30 years later, we signed to Frontier Records, and I had a really funny phone call with their CEO, this guy named Serafino, and he's this Italian guy, and he would talk like this, right? And so when he called me and said that he had heard that Coney Hatch had got back together, and that was really, I think, if I was to pinpoint, like, we had an amazing ride and toured with Judas Priest and Iron Maiden and Crocus and Accept and Ted Nugent and Edgar Winter and Triumph and like all my heroes. I was like, oh my God, like, this is crazy, right? I had posters of those bands up on my wall as a 16-year-old little punter. But and then to be on the road with them and to actually, Edgar Winter was one of my favorites, and to open up for Edgar Winter and actually come and talk to him, I had my mind blown, right? So the chapter of the 80s about playing and having the opportunity to play with those bands, I think gets overshadowed, and the real story was when Carl Dixon got in the car accident and really shouldn't have survived it. It was a head-on car collision in Australia, and they put him back together literally. They had his titanium rods in his arms and his femur, and just crazy that the guy is even alive. And it's a bit of an urban myth story, but his wife at the time called me up and said, he's on death's bed. The doctors have said, call his friends so he can hear some voice that he recognizes, and just try to keep his spirits up. So he was in a coma when he spoke to me. They handed a phone to him, and I just said, the first thing that came to my mind, dude, you got to get better, man. We got a lot of rocking to do. Like, we got some serious rocking to do. Like, get better, come, get home, and we'll get out there playing again. Not even thinking anything of it, right? Comes out of the coma, returns home, gets brought in a wheelchair, and looks at me and goes, so when are we playing our shows?
Wow.
Oh my God, right? So I said, first things first, Carl, why don't you learn how to walk and play guitar and sing again and all that kind of stuff, right? Yeah. So we played a show in Hamilton with Y108, the Hamilton radio station out there. They invited us to open up for Gord Downey's solo band when Gord was alive, right? Right. And that was the first time the Hatchers had played in a very, very long time. And then the news spread, Coney Hatch is back together, and I get this call from this guy in Italy. And it was like talking to someone from the movie Scarface, right? He goes, hey, Andy, it's Serafino. I want a new Coney Hatch record. But listen, and this is the best part. He goes, listen to me carefully. I want no surprises. I don't want Foo Fighters or Queens of Stone Age. I want vintage Coney Hatch. Do you understand me? And I'm like, yes, sir. So we had a bunch. I wouldn't say a bunch, but we had maybe 2 or 3 songs that we had demoed that didn't make the record in 1982 when Kim Mitchell was our producer. And we dusted them off and we finished them. And that was part of the Coney Hatch 4 record, right? And so recently we've had Sean Kelly fill in on lead guitar. And you guys know Sean Kelly's played with, Helix and Crash Kelly was his band. He's amazing. So we had some, he's played with Rough Trade and Lee Aaron. And like, he's an amazing guitar player. So I would say that the Hatchers are weekend warriors right now. Like if it works out for us and everybody, Dave Ketchum lives in Thunder Bay and he flies in, you guys know what it's like to be geographically challenged when you have a show and everybody's flying in, right? Yeah. So we're weekend warriors. We play about 6 shows a year, but we still, everybody loves each other still. That's so awesome that Ketchum's in the lineup too, because Barry came in at some point, Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember burying you guys in the Fantasy video. That was like a big thing on Much Music for quite a while for me when I was young. And but Shelsky was always in the band, and with your solo band too, right? You and Dave have had a long history. Yeah, so Dave and I founded Coney Hatch, and there was, guys, you've all been in bands, so there's these weird side conversations that I was like, I think we'd be a better band if we could get like so and so, and it never ends up doing anything most of the time other than crushing the original vibe that was that chemistry, right? Exactly. You might have somebody that's technically better, but the minute we started messing with the original. The 4 guys, I think that's when things got funky. But on the solo stuff, that after I left the Hatch, I did pull Steve Shelsky in, and then he got an offer to play with Larry Gowan. So there I was. There was, all by myself. So that's when I started to put my own things together after the Hatch chapters, Yeah, and you had a great run doing the solo thing, which I always think there's something really cool about, and this is just the way as a guy who plays bass and plays guitar, I love the look that Phil Lynott kind of like the bass player in the middle singing, and then these 2 guitar players on the other side. I always thought that looked really, really cool when you did your no tattoos and all that kind of stuff. Well, you're no slouch yourself, buddy. I got to tell you that. Like, seeing you play with a variety of bands I love it too. And definitely Thin Lizzy was a huge influence growing up in Canada, obviously with Geddy. But Geddy's bass playing is just like, in a different level. 100%. But with the solo stuff, it really was, do I try to keep Coney Hatch together? And we tried. Here's some interesting trivia. After Carl officially left the band, Kevin LaBrie, who is in Dream Theater, was in Coney Hatch for about 5 minutes. We had played about 3 shows. Phil Narrow from Talus was in the band. And those combos just didn't seem to go anywhere. And finally, I just said to Steve, I'm done with the Hatch, dude. I'm gone. I'm going to start my own band. If you want to come with me, you can. And he was like, yeah, okay. And then Larry called him up in the middle of it, and he went that way. So, it was a little scary to go out on my own at that point. But, a lot of people know me for Coney Hatch, but I would think, Todd, to your point, I might have had more success with the solo stuff. I got a Juno Award that year for the most promising male vocalist, which was funny because I'd been in the business for already 5 or 6 years or whatever, right? It's one of those pointy ones. I did keep it. I didn't give it. And when my daughters were little, we used to toss rings on them, like a ring toss, right? And then I got a nomination for Best Hard Rock Album, which I love because I'm a hard rock guy. Absolutely. And went on to form Soho 69 after that and put out a record with Hypnotic. And then And then, got signed with Geffen with my band Caramel. And then after I put Caramel together, I had a band called Drug Plan that turned into Trailer Park. And we got signed by Artist Direct. So there was some American love after that. And I did a little bit of touring with Econoline Crush and Stabbing Westward and Creed with later bands. And I would have to argue, for me, those last couple records were pretty special, even though the dance was over very quick. You got a big signing advance, and then all of a sudden the record company like Geffen getting bought by Universal. You're like, wait a second, one of the best labels in the world gets bought. So that dance was over really quick. But I will tell you, I have a pal of mine, really good friend, Adam Jones, who worked at Rounder Concord as their digital manager. And between Adam and my wife going, get a freaking website, put that music up there, get it up for sale, put some videos on there, put a couple of your old cover songs up there and have some fun with it, right? Yeah. So all of the above I'm doing, and I wanted to tell the members of Toque that I've stolen an idea from you, and I've got a section that's going to come up, and it's going to be called Andy's Jukebox, and it started when I was invited to play to participate in a tribute record for Neil Young, and it was Sony. It was called Borrowed Tunes. So Sony came to me and the guys in Junk House, and I had a publishing deal, and they said, Andy, what song do you want to do? And I was like, Cinnamon Girl. I'm going to do like a heavy version of Cinnamon Girl. And so we went in and cut it, and not a lot of people have heard that. And while I was at the publishing company, they said, hey, there's this movie called Bride of Chucky, and they want you to do a cover version, like a creepy cover version of Hello, Dolly. And I'm like, hell yeah, I'm doing that, right? And next thing you know, somebody asked me if I do a cover version, a heavy metal cover version of Yummy Yummy. I Got Love in My Tummy. So I have all of these buried. And I just worked up a version with Sean Kelly of Flash in the Pan, Walking in the Rain. And I've got a version of that. So coming soon on my website is Andy's Jukebox, and it's going to be all covers. When my solo band used to do a medley of Cisco Kid and Lowrider put together, but it was very heavy and totally just a pounder. Sure. So I've taken the Toque model that is identify bands and artists that you love and go cut those tracks.
Well, people, like Bowie did pinups back in the 70s where it was all cover, his favorite covers. And that's not an uncommon thing for people to go and do that. Toque's more like, very specifically Canadian, but that's a great idea. I think that Cinnamon Girl I have heard, and it's fantastic. So it's,
I broke out the 12-string bass in that, Todd, and because the guys in Coney Hatch would never let me play 12-string bass, and Shelsky would always say, "You're taking up too much room, man. That's just eating." And the guitar players living there like, "No, you're in my space, man.
Exactly,
you're gobbling it all up." So. And the solo thing, I was, I'm going to do whatever the hell I want. I'm not going to listen to the guitar players anymore. But you're right about Carl. His voice, dude. That was a pretty intimidating chapter for me because I would, I kind of was a singer by default, and I put the band together and it was like, who's going to sing? And I guess I will, right? Sure. No formal training, no nothing. And then you have a guy that sounds like Lou Gramm or Paul Rogers in the same band with you. So we definitely.
He's one of those guys that he could have gone on to do something like that, like to have been in something like that, no problem, because he's he's one of those great identifiable rock voices, like you say, like Lou Gramm or something like that.
Yeah, he could sing the phone book and it would sound great, that guy, But so I would, and people. It was funny, Todd. The guys used to come to our show in Coney Hatch, and they'd be like, "Oh, you're the talk singer guy. You're the
talk singer."
No, I think there's something to be said about that because the attitude, and I come from a punk rock background too, so it was kind of like one of those things that I kind of learned as I went along that I can sing pretty high, but I loved all the guys that were shouting and yelling and selling it like beyond just range and technique per se. So I think that, that's what's beautiful about the Coney Hatch. The first Coney Hatch record is you do have, like, say, Devil's Deck, Hey Operator, but then, like, something like Monkey Bars really sort of balances out this whole other, palette of color in it that I think really works. So how'd that Anthem thing all come about, by the way? I was going to ask you about that. When you guys signed, because Anthem was technically Rush's label, that's how that all goes.
Yeah.
What a great Canadian thing to be attached to.
Yeah, that was all Kim Mitchell, and the story's been told like many moons ago. But when we would play full weeks at the Gasworks on Yonge Street. That was you had to get to a certain level, and it's funny because most of the people today think about Wayne's World when they hear the Gasworks. No, it was a real kick-ass spot. Like
I played way back then.
Yeah, and I would see. I'd normally go there to see God. They were one of my favorite bands. Speaking of great Canadian, good rock bands. So we, on one of the week-long stints at the Gasworks, I see this guy writing at a table, and he's just like got a pad, and I'm like, oh my God, somebody came to review Coney Hatch. It might be like the Toronto Star or something, right? And we didn't have a record deal or anything. So after one of our 4 sets that night, I went and sat down with him, and I'm like, hey dude, Andy Curran, and are you from a magazine or something? And he goes, no, have a seat here. He goes, my name is Pi Dubois. And I'm like, oh my God. So Pi Dubois, for anybody listening, was the 5th member really of Max Webb's, or 5th or 6th, depending on what lineup, wrote all the lyrics for and he said, no, I was just actually writing some lyrics, but you know what? I really like you guys. And Kim had just disbanded Max Webster, and he goes, Kim's looking for something to sink his teeth into, and I have a feeling that he would really like you. I'm going to bring him down to the Gasworks. Cool. So we're freaking out, and a couple of days later, Kim comes down with Pi, and he's like, I think there's something here, boys. Let me take you into the studio and let's cut a demo of your original stuff. And we were playing half cover songs, half original stuff. So we were playing like AC/DC, Rolling Stones, Eddie and the Hot Rods. We were doing the Monks, Drugs in My Pocket. Like, it was just all over the place, right? Because I loved punk rock stuff. I tried to get the band to do some Sex Pistols, and they were like, that's a little bit too far. But, so Kim said, it's going to cost you guys $1,500 to come in the studio, and I'm going to take you in. We had no money at all. Right. So I went and asked my dad if he could loan me the money. He made us all sign a promissory note that he's like God bless his heart. God bless him. He passed away last year, but he was so supportive. And the old British character, and he said, listen, son, I'm not giving you a bloody free ride here. You're going to sign a promissory note, and all the blokes in your band are going to sign it, and I'll give you the money. So we actually we signed a promissory note, did the demo with Kim Mitchell. Amazing. And he said, I'm going to take it in and play it for Dean Cameron, who was the A&R guy at EMI at the time, and I'm going to play it for Ray Daniels. And we're like, cool. Yeah. And we had a little mini bidding war, and Ray said, not only will I sign you to my label, but I'll be your manager. And you guys, being Canadian boys, know, wait a second, Rush's manager is going to manage us, right?
Exactly, yeah.
So there was a guy by the name of Bruce Wilson that managed us in Anvil at the time and a few other bands, and we owed him a couple grand, and Ray went, here's a check, there you go, bye-bye, and the rest is history.
Wow.
That's how that happened.
What year was the demo cut?
That would have been the end of 1980, early 1981.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah. And then the first record came out in 82. So that was right when Kim had disbanded Max Webster.
It's so amazing for me to think that, like, from 82 to 85, you guys were so productive. It seems like you were around for way longer than that.
Yeah, I know it does. Yeah, it's weird.
Yeah.
Really?
Well, and that was that era, guys, too. Not as bad as, when you look at Rush or some of the 70s bands that were putting out a couple albums a year. Yeah. But that was that cycle, okay? You recorded, you finished the tour, and boom, you're going in. And we didn't. The second album, I think, suffered because we that age-old that adage that you have a lifetime to write your first record, and then the second and third. So, funny story, Max Norman, who was the producer of the second album, and we shouldn't have changed that either. We should have kept with Kim Mitchell. But the record label said, we should have a name producer. Let's get Ozzy Osbourne's producer on it. And we were young and impressionable, so we were like, Ozzy's producer? Are you kidding me, right? So, true story, we have a dinner with the record company, Ray Daniels and our A&R guy, Tom Barry. Max Norman and the band. And everybody's having a toast, and he says, well, you guys made a great record. Don't know what you're going to do about the first single. And then he just did it. And I can remember the record company looking at him like, oh my God, what are we going to do, right? But, you know, we were pretty lucky at that time because MTV had no videos. And basically what you sent them, unless it sucked, you were going to get on. So we immediately got onto MTV, which helped us get on those tours with Priest and Maiden. I mean, arguably, those two tours were the peak of both of those bands. Yeah. Screaming for Vengeance and The Number of the Beast. I mean, you talk about being in the right place at the right time, right?
Totally. Yeah.
So those, really good memories back in the day. But just, we were young and did tons of stupid stuff. We put our manager put us on a $250 a week salary and convinced us to buy a 5-ton truck, go out and buy PA, lighting, and by the end of the chapter, we were like, we had no money. We were like, okay, we should have been paying ourselves.
So Andy, to just kind of cover that timeline a little bit, you said you went from being a kind of a half cover band / original band playing weekly to all of a sudden right into the studio cutting a demo, and then it seems like a year later putting out that first album. You say you have a lifetime to write your first record. Did you have the material set up at that point, or was there a bit of a struggle to say, let's complete this?
Yeah. No, we did. For the first album, Kim took us into the studio, and guys in Toque, you can relate to the story too. So we cut the full record, took a break for Christmas, and Kim said, let's go back and mix the record in January, and then came back in January and said, I hate everything. Let's start over again. We need a couple more songs. Monkey Bars was written. That was a very last minute addition to it. Hey Operator was written very late. Wow. So we had all the material, and Darren, further to your question, it was really interesting because I can remember at that point, like one of our last club gigs was the Nob Hill Hotel in Scarborough. So we jumped in our van from the Nob Hill and drove to Wisconsin or something crazy like that to start the Judas Priest tour or something, right? Wow. So it was a rocket ride. I mean, we couldn't believe it that we went from playing those clubs to being in front of 12,000 people like a week later. It's just, it's stuff you fantasize about that doesn't ever happen, right?
And now, Andy, I wanted to know about the for Monkey Bars. Kim Mitchell played guitar, like the solo, right? Is that confirmed?
No, you know what? That's a bit of an urban myth too. So
I was curious.
A lot of people think that because the guitar, the solo is very
Kim Mitchell.
Yeah, it's very Kim Mitchell, but it's and correct me, guitar players, if I'm using the wrong wordage here. It's very atonal. It's not melodic. Sure. It's so that's why people thought it was Kim, but Kim said to Steve, who is a Humber Music jazz graduate, dude, on that solo, I want you to step out, do something really strange, do something bizarre, like that Humber shit you played, like play that, right? Uh-huh. So that solo is derived from Donna Lee. If you listen to Charlie Parker Donna Lee song, right? Oh, and so if you listen to it, it starts off melodically like that, and then he deviates from it. But Kim sang a bunch of background vocals on Devil's Deck, on Victim of Rock, but he did not play any guitar. And I think back at those lyrics, and I was like, Kim, these lyrics are pretty juvenile. I should rewrite them, because it was one of the first songs I ever wrote, Monkey Bars. Right. It still reminds me of a nursery rhyme. And he's like, no, dude, it's got its own charm. Like, that's exactly right. Keep it, right? So,
where was that Tract, that record?
At Oshawa in a recording studio called Quest.
And it was not like in the big city. You were out in Oshawa. Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
That's cool. Wow.
That's fantastic.
The schwa.
That's exciting. The schwa.
The dirty schwa.
So going back to something you said earlier too, Andy, you said, Coney Hatch is now what you would consider to be weekend warriors. Has there been any dates affected by, obviously, all the COVID-19 stuff that's going on? And what can people look forward to?
All of
the
dates?
Where they're...
Yeah. So, yes, we just had to cancel 2 shows, and we were in the midst of booking some summer shows. But with that album that we did for Frontiers, a lot of the press was based out of, and again, all you guys would know this, when you get good press in Europe, it kind of spins off into offers. And so Classic Rock Magazine voted Coney Hatch 4 in the top 50 albums of that year. And we were what's going on here? We just kind of got in, it was like like a shinny hockey guys getting together to make an album, right? So that started to spark some interest in Europe. And ever since that album has come out, we played 2 or 3 shows in Germany. We went to France. And we were supposed to go back to play a show in Germany in September. And we had an opening slot, ironically, with our pal that started it all, Kim Mitchell, to open up for Kim in Buffalo. So both those dates have been postponed until 2021. And we were in the midst of looking at other offers, but when COVID hit, we were just like, all bets are off here. Let's just social distance and be safe, right?
That, actually, there was a question that just came up online, and somebody was asking if there was, or is there any hope that people could see a live album?
So that was the one thing I wanted to mention to you. Coney Hatch has never done a live album. And when we were in Germany 2 years ago, we hired a guy to come in with a Pro Tools system. And Carl actually didn't tell anybody in the band so that we wouldn't have red light fever of the recording thing going on. Set up a rig at the side of the stage, and we just blasted a set. And at this very moment, Vic Florencia, who is a really good Juno Award-winning engineer here in Toronto, is mixing the Coney Hatch live album. And we had 2 songs that we had in the can that were for Coney Hatch 4 that we didn't put on it, that we're completing. And we're talking to a label in LA right now called Explorer One that were introduced to us by Steve Harris of Iron Maiden, and Steve's band. British Lion. They're signed to that label. So they said to us, hey, are you guys potentially interested in releasing the album on Explorer One? And Coney Hatch has never had a live album. We said, yeah, we've got a couple studio songs in the can too. And we're even talking to the folks over at Anthem. So everything old is new again, but I think you will see a Coney Hatch live album within the next year.
Amazing.
That's awesome.
That's exciting.
Yeah, right.
So I want to just really quickly cut you loose pretty soon here. But I know you're involved in the reopening of the El Mocambo there in Toronto. So if anybody that doesn't know, the El Mocambo in Toronto was a legendary spot. The Stones played there. It's been closed for how long now?
About 3.5 to 4 years with the renovations after Michael Weckerly bought it. Yeah. But Todd, I think that, not only, U2 played their first ever Canadian show there. Stevie Ray Vaughan, the Ramones, Blondie, Cheap Trick. The list just goes on and on and on, right? So, yeah.
Union, that's right.
Exactly, right?
Yes.
But I think when I was asked to work with Michael and be part of it, I had Coney Hatch played there back in the day, and I saw the Car. I'm dating myself. I saw the Cars' very first show in Canada play there when they played their debut record, right? So I was like, man, I'm in. And if you go to elmocambo.com now and check out that website, and you can see the crazy renovations. They went 30 feet up and 10 feet down. There's an audio and video control rooms. And it's crazy in this time of COVID, because when I started working with Michael, I said, we should be a live streaming venue. And I'm going back 2 years ago. Wow. So we have an SSL console in there in the audio control room. We've got a full 4K video suite in the video control room, and we've got a live streaming. And so we can live stream at 4K video and at high res audio. And we're the only venue in I would say Canada that can do that. And Randy Lennox helped us put a 10 gigabyte dual core fiber optic cable in the back that we can just basically, Toque could come in there tomorrow and we could stream to the world at broadcast quality, right? So the cool thing now is we're working with the city of Toronto, and they're going to let us start talking to people like yourselves. And when the travel gets a little bit better, we've now been told that we can start hosting artists in the El Mocambo, and we were talking to Big Rec a couple days ago about them coming in with no audience. And they'll slowly start loosening up the capacity, but we're going to be part of the Canada Day virtual Canada Day Live on July 1st, and some of those hits will be live at the El Mocambo. So Todd, it's phenomenal. Like I'm not even drinking the Kool-Aid. It might be one of the best clubs in the world that I've ever been inside. Like Michael Weckerly spent so much money on. He spent $2.4 million on the lighting and PA alone.
What's the capacity at?
There's two floors. The top floor is probably about 500, and the bottom floor is about 300. So getting back to you guys saying if it's a 300 capacity, two could fill 150. So come on.
Yeah, exactly.
So a couple quick questions here, Andy. Just coming from the live stream here too.
Yeah.
This could be true, and obviously I've never heard of it. Is it true you've got a bass made from the actual floor from the Elmo? There.
Absolutely. I want to. One second here. Yeah.
Hit it.
All
I
right.
didn't know this story. Did you
No,
know
I'm
this
just
story,
reading some
Darren?
stuff
Is
that
this
people
one
are
of your-
posting online, and it
what's
just
your
seemed
reading?
like too good of some question to pass up.
What?
Dude, that's insane.
Oh, wait.
No
You should.
way.
That's cool,
That's
man.
rad.
Wow.
So cool.
Let me put my headphones in.
No problem. So how did that even, you just got some wood and then just make this into a bass?
Well, what happened with this is, and if you can see this, it's more the veneer on the top.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So all of the top here is panels from, it's taken out of the rafters of the El Mocambo. It's 300-year-old Douglas fir.
Oh, wow.
And so I had my pals at Lucian right there.
Right.
They're a really cool luthier in Toronto, just in Oakville. And we got a old Fender, sort of what I call a Telecaster neck on it, right? But
Tele bass.
yeah, like a 50s one, and we use the veneer on it, and so that's the wood from the El Mocambo. But Fender are going to come out with a model as well later on at NAMM. But this has quickly become my A bass. A lot.
I bet. Yeah,
That's so cool.
Great.
It's beat to crap, as you can see it right already.
As it should be.
Even better.
Yeah.
Meant to be played, I say.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, Garen at Lucian put it together. He's an incredible luthier.
That's fantastic.
That's awesome.
And Andy, my last question here is: you know that we're all big Coney Hatch fans, so you're probably wondering why we've never done a Coney Hatch tune on any Toque records. And the reason is because we all like Coney Hatch from different eras. I mean, it's only a 3-year career, I guess, but I'm a big fan of Friction. I like Hey Operator, but others like Monkey Bars, and we can't decide on what song to actually do. So what would you say, if you were calling the shots, what song should we do?
Well, because I'm a fan of Todd and Age of Electric, and I'm trying to think, I'm visioning him singing it. I would have to say Devil's Deck. I think he could crush Devil's Deck. I really do. I think you guys could crush that song. That would be my choice, because as much as I'm proud of the other albums, I think the first Coney Hatch album was really captured what the band was about. And the fourth album, if you talk to David Ketchum, we're both proud of the first and the fourth album, because they're a lot more raw.
Yeah,
but
for sure.
I think you guys could crush it. It's got some really cool solo parts on it, and
does.
I know Brent could lay it down like it should be laid down.
Well, it's funny how, I think it's always been rather imposing in its own way, because Carl's, always been one of my, when I was young, we did Hey Operator, probably the most, I'm sure it sounded terrible, but when teenagers playing Hey Operator. But we love that record. That was a very influential record for us. So when you're talking about UFO and all those bands and those posters you had on your wall, we had Coney Hatch on ours, you know what I mean?
Wow.
So it was the Friction album that actually I was, my girlfriend at the time was breaking up with me, and I was 12 years old or something. So it was very, very emotional and heartbreaking for me. So the song She's Gone, I just played over and over and over.
Oh, yeah.
Because she was gone, man. It hit me right here.
That is a heartbreaker, that one. But honestly, guys, like all of you are so accomplished and amazing musicians, and it's an honor to be on the show with you guys today. And I've watched you from afar doing what you do in all of your different solo endeavors, and it would be an absolute honor if you guys crushed a Coney Hatch song on a Toque record. I would be stoked, totally stoked.
Well,
it's happening, baby.
On that note, Andy, look for that in the future. We do have to wrap up here for the first segment. We want to thank you for coming on, and of course we can talk, and you're more than welcome to hang out with us. We've got Eddie Trunk standing by, ready to come on the air. So we have.
Well, I don't know if technology allows for me and Eddie to be on at the same time, but I'd certainly love to say hello to him.
You can hang out
in
our green room. So just stay where you are, and we're gonna.
You guys are the best.
Again,
thank you very much.
Thanks, Andy.
Maybe we can chat again, hopefully in person next time. So again, thanks to Andy for being on the show today. And we're just going to cut to our slice of life piece here that we like to do now on Toque Talk. And Todd Curran is going to take us to his house where I guess you were shipped this bass this week from Prestige. And you want to tell anybody a little bit about it, or is it all in the video?
Yeah, no, our very good friend Jimmy Webb passed away so recently it's hard to even imagine. But Jimmy was a real staple of the entire New York scene. He was at Trash and Vaudeville since 1975 or something crazy like that, up until a couple of years ago. Trash and Vaudeville was like a punk rock and roll shop down in St. Mark's in the Village. And then he opened his own store, I Need More, in the Lower East Side. And, we had everybody like come around, Debbie Harry from Blondie and Iggy Pop and Slash and Duff, Ewan McGregor, he had all these people just always kind of around. And we loved him to death. He was on the road with us on multiple occasions with the Slash guys. And I always intended to kind of get, because he had his own store, and everything was this crazy hot pink color. And I was like, I'm going to get a bass done for Jimmy. I'll play it on someday, and then we're going to hang it up in his store. And, of course, the way things go, it never really happened. So Jimmy passed away, and then now they sent me this bass
awesome. So
as a tribute.
Here's Todd
sure.
opening his bass.
Wow.
Everybody stick around, give us a few seconds, and we're going to be right back with Eddie Trunk.
Hey, everybody. It's your pal, Todd, damn it. This is... my fine friends over at Prestige Guitars have taken it upon themselves to send me this beautiful giant box. I assume it's a guitar. We're not quite sure what's in here, but just kidding. They have built for me a tribute bass that we built for the memory of our dear friend Jimmy Webb, who passed away last month. And my intention was hopefully someday to give this to him, put it on his wall someday, but that never happened. So in the meantime, I'm going to play it, and it's going to be on stage, and we're going to enjoy it. So let's open it together, shall we? Upon opening the box, I found this amazing note taped to the box of the bass guitar. I'm not sure who put it here, but I love it. It says, I try to be a guide for people, to make their darkness bright, and to make the pathway light, and never to condemn or control or criticize Little Richard. That is the most perfect thing you could put on a Jimmy Webb bass guitar. And the best part of any new package is bubble wrapping. Woo! So we've got the box open, and this is the big Prestige Guitars case. Anti-Star bass, just so you know, Prestige Guitars has been around. I've been friendly with them for about 20 years, I guess, something like that. And the Anti-Star bass, my signature Anti-Star bass, was the very first bass guitar they ever built. So, once again, this is the Jimmy Webb tribute in Jimmy Pink Anti-Star bass, which is my signature bass. And this is our first time opening it, so this is very exciting. It's Christmas time. Christmas come early. Ready? Da 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 da! Holy cow, huh? Whoa! Whoa! That is bananas, huh? Pretty funky. Very exciting. So this will be fun. I'm going to be doing a Prestige Instagram chat soon, so this one will be definitely being shown off. Thank you, guys. Love you, Jimmy. Thank you, Prestige.
Standing
You
by.
can move everybody's faces around. If you just grab it on your screen, you can.
Oh, really?
You can put somebody in the four corners. Oh yeah, you can pick.
Oh,
So
that's
you don't
good
want
to know.
yourself to be. Yeah.
This is the best it's ever been set up for me. For some
Yeah,
reason.
for me
It's just-
too.
Shane
Yeah.
keeps dropping out on me here, but keeps moving around. Let me get you going.
I just want to see more of them, that's all.
Yeah.
Shane, you there?
Yeah, everybody's
one,
here.
two.
So, again, we want to thank Andy for sitting in with us for the first hour. And, of course, a man who needs no introduction in a setting like this. But we'll give it to him anyways. Fitzy, you want to take it away?
Oh my gosh.
On the
Well,
spot.
I think we all know that probably one of the most musicologists who actually is American but knows a lot about Canadian music is the legendary voice of New York radio today. And it's funny. Before he comes on, I just want to say, I'm up in Winnipeg. I'm up in Winnipeg because I quarantined.
Oh, he's on.
Check this out, Teddy. Teddy, if it wasn't for you, I drove about 28 hours to Winnipeg, and I put all your podcasts together, and you got me through the whole podcast. I listened to Aldo Nova, I listened to Desmond Child, I listened to all the Holly Knight, all your podcasts the whole way up, and it literally made my trip. So it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool.
Wow. I'm glad. That's very cool. Thank you. I'm glad. That's very cool. That's awesome. Aldo just got in touch. That's awesome. Aldo just got in touch with me. He sent me a new song. He's working on a new record. He literally just heard from him for the first time in like a year and a half the other day.
Wow.
That's great because you actually answered a lot of great questions that I didn't know about him. And of course, you're a great interview. So, but it was cool, man, because I don't think anyone had heard from him in like 20 years or something. I don't know.
No, I don't know if you guys know this, but here we go, getting right into the geek. 2 seconds.
Bring it on, baby.
30 seconds in. Did you know that like a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, he did an EP where he re-recorded 5 songs from his first album?
Well, I learned it from you, so I was listening to that on the way up
from the
too.
podcast. But so that's what the interview was about. And he'd come in and, at that time, he was like a lot of artists that I see that have been on the sidelines for like 20, 30 years. And then they decide, okay, I want to get back in the business. And then they sort of stick their head up and they see what the business is now. Right. And it's like, oh, So he then disappeared for another year and a half or 2 years. And like, it's funny you're bringing it up, right? Because just the other day, he sent me an email. He's like, I got a new record. I want to share a song with you. And it was cool.
That's awesome. That's so cool. So, as an American living like in his original run, were you aware of the first like Fantasy and all that? Like, had you heard? Like, was that popular in your area, Jersey, in that area?
Fantasy was popular because of MTV.
Sure, right, yeah.
Early days of MTV, that video was on MTV constantly, and for its time, it was a pretty big production video. With the coming out of the spaceship or whatever that it was.
The sweet lasers.
There were some lasers.
And a helicopter.
Yeah.
Didn't shoot a laser out of his Les Paul.
I did.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, so good. In his leopard skin suit with the boots.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
There was a really long build-up before they got to the actual song, if you remember, too. It was like a whole theatrical thing. But the video was huge on MTV. And then a really interesting thing years later, way later, like I want to say like 92, 93-ish, John Bon Jovi decides he's going to start his own record label.
Yeah.
And John was always a fan of Aldo's. So John starts this label called Jamco, which stood for John Anthony Matt Bon Jovi Company, because it was his brothers were involved or something.
Okay.
And it was distributed through Polygram. And John reached out to me about working for his record company. And I was going to be one of the first hires. So he and I met, we had lunch. And at that time, it was just before Bon Jovi did Keep the Faith. And he was saying to me, around that time, there was a lot of drama and the band was almost breaking up and they had just been exhausted. And he goes, I don't even know if I still have a band anymore. He said, but I'm going to go away. Me and the guys are having this retreat. We're going to decide if we're still doing a band. You think about the offer if you want to work for me, because in all honesty, the money was not great that he offered me to basically be the second person from the top of his label. And he said, think about it. I'm going to go meet with my band. When I come back, give me an answer. Okay, fair enough. So he left. I think he went to St. Thomas or something, had this meeting with his band. And in the week he was gone, the guy who was working for his company already, who has since passed away, unfortunately, but he calls me up and he said, well, how are you feeling about this? And I said, I really it'd be amazing to work for Bon Jovi, but the problem is the money's not great. And the other problem is I was managing a band at the time that I felt really strongly about. And he wanted, of course, a piece of the band if I started working for him. So I'm like, I don't feel so good about that either. And he's like, well, look, don't stress the decision, because when he comes back from this meeting, he's going to fold this label. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Because at that time they had a record out by Billy Falcon. They had a record out by Aldo Nova called Blood on the Bricks.
Yeah.
And Aldo was on a free radio tour playing free radio shows across the country.
Sure.
So the story goes how that deal with Jamco was set up for Bon Jovi is any money that company lost on releases came out of Bon Jovi's royalties because it was all on the same company, Polygram.
Ouch.
And this guy was like, we got Aldo out there hemorrhaging money, playing free radio shows and not selling. When he comes back and sees the hit the balance sheet took from this, he's going to fold this thing so quick. And I swear to you, I never gave John an answer. About a week later, phone rings. He's like, hey, man, so here's what I'm thinking. This label thing is killing me. And he took the whole thing down. So that was flirt with working for Bon Jovi and how Aldo indirectly made the decision for me, because unfortunately that record didn't sell.
Oh, that's
I opened a bunch of those dates, Eddie, in Canada. I did not a bunch, but I did Winnipeg and Toronto. And I remember on the show, just a side note, but it was interesting. My first time playing a big venue in Toronto, opening for Aldo on the Blood on the Bricks tour. But we always thought that guitar player was wicked. And, it turned into the relationship. It was Phil, who now is in the band Bon Jovi. But, obviously the apple didn't fall far from the tree. They all knew each other back then. And we probably should have Phil on the show to ask him about that story. But interesting, at that show, the Labatt's Beer Entertainment rep, who was, probably in Toronto, said to me, hey, if you ever need anything, Brent, because he was a friend of our bass player or something, he gave me his card and he said, I want to stay in touch. Well, it turns out, and he's from Thunder Bay, Ontario, his name is Mike Rapino, and he is now the president of Live Nation.
Yeah.
What a small thing, but it all happened at an Aldo Nova Blood on the Bricks tour show in Toronto. So, and Phil X and I are good friends. In fact, we actually play together now in another thing, one of Phil's bands. So, just crazy. Like, I have all these connections to Aldo Nova, and I really liked your podcast because you told me something I didn't know, that he was involved in that first Bon Jovi record too.
Yeah,
and was a big part of the Young Guns soundtrack too, if I'm not mistaken, right? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. John's always been a big fan and supporter of his, it seems. So, and then, Aldo did all that stuff working for, the Celine Dion stuff and all that.
Yeah.
But he's really trying to come back and reestablish, I think, as a hard rocker. And I wish him nothing but the best. What he sent me was cool. So, it's just, you guys know, I mean, I see this a lot with artists who have been on the sideline for a long time. Like, they had success in the 80s. And they went on other things. They sat out for 15, 20, 25 years. And the business is so different now. The money, what you have to do, that it's kind of like a shock to them. And some are willing to do the adapting, and some just want to go back and I'm going to go back underground a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, I mean, from your perspective, you're in a very unique position as a fan of music who found himself in such an interesting place because you not only have you people know you mostly as a personality went out, but you've been like involved in Megaforce, you manage bands, you've been so involved in all that kind of stuff. You've watched the record industry change under our feet as we speak. So it's like you must have the most interesting take on how these. And I've seen you mention it before when bands come out or artists come out and they kind of are doing a reunion thing. It's not always a slam dunk. It's tough to come back and go like, I'm here. And then what do you do with that from there? Because record sales that's not where the money is. The money's always in the live show now, even for the Aerosmiths and the reason Paul McCartney and Rolling Stones are still on the road, because that's where the money is. They all know that. But
yeah. Which makes the times we're in now super challenging because all you guys
exactly.
and make your living on the road, and it's really fascinating now to see how people are trying to adapt and evolve, and whether it be drive-in movie theater shows or whether it be, speaking of Live Nation, I just saw the other day they announced the Black Crowes are going to do a concert online. I don't know if it's going to be ticketed, but they're going to try to do that. What's happening with the online performance stuff? Because literally anybody can be in their bedroom doing. Well, I'm in a bedroom. Literally could be anywhere doing. If I had talent, I'd be playing guitar. I could play a song. But the thing is that now I think what you're seeing happening is everybody wants to try to up the production value and make that feel like a more of an experience to see if they can do something more with it, and maybe even put a paywall up and get a chance for these artists and their crews. Because let's not forget, as you guys know, the crews are even in worse shape. Those guys trying to make money. And I host a cruise every year called the Monsters of Rock Cruise. And on their Facebook page, they just did a thing where they're calling it the Monsters of Rock Studio. And they're doing a third encore in LA. And they're putting bands in there to play. And they're giving them a split on money. They're basically putting a tip jar up on the screen. And some of these artists are making decent money. And their focus is to make it look cool and sound cool. So there's video screens behind the artist. There's cool lighting. They've got a professional sound mix. It's still, at the end of the day, an online stream. It'll never replace being in the pit with your buddies watching a show, but it's just trying to up the production value because, unfortunately, we might be in that boat for a little while longer.
Well, that's the funniest thing is I've been having this conversation with people recently where they say, do you think that the online concerts, like what you're talking about, when they start upping the value where it actually looks great and sounds great, do you think that's going to affect live shows? And I go, I don't think so, because I don't think anybody goes like, I'm not going to go to the Bahamas because I watched a documentary about it and that's good. It's like, no, people want to see things live. They want to, you can't watch a video about parachuting and think like, yeah, I've had that experience. No, you have not had that experience. So we've all watched live concerts on TV. We still want to go see live shows. That's the whole animal, is seeing it in person. That's so when it happens, it'll happen.
Eddie, further to that, I just got to ask you a question because I listen to your show all the time, and I know obviously your opinion on tracking and bands that are using tracks to obviously replace. I'm just going to touch on this really easily because given the fact that now artists can now stream these concerts, do you find that this is actually going to, or do you think it's going to actually be a live show, or is this just going to be another avenue for people to play and obviously, include a lot of pre-recorded parts?
I don't know. I haven't even thought about that. I think that bands that use a lot of tracks are still going to keep using them, unfortunately, and the bands that aren't and are plugging in and playing and going for it real are going to keep playing and being real. My position on that, and I have been super outspoken about it because as a rock fan, it makes me crazy because I think of the times when, like, you guys remember when it was Ashley Simpson performed on Saturday Night Live and got busted lip syncing. And the world went crazy. Like, she got destroyed. Now, in pop music, it's the norm.
Yeah.
It's the total norm. Like, people don't, just accept it. And I feel it's like, I go to these rock festivals, and I got to tell you, I get so wound up about it as a rock fan, but I have to tell you something else. The other people that wind me up about it are all the artists who don't do it, who are livid to go on these festival stages and have to hear backstage about a band from fans that was so great that was on before or after them and sounded just like the record because they were playing for the record. So it's just wrong across the board. And my last thing on this, just so I'm clear, I have no problem if like you have keyboards in one song and you're playing that track. I have no problem if you have an orchestra piece in one song. I don't expect you to bring an orchestra on stage, but there's a line. When you've got tons of vocals and guitars and bass, and it's like karaoke at one point. It's like what am I seeing? Like, what's the difference between a live show and a not live show? What's the difference between a good show and a live show? I have no talent in the world. I could go out there and sound great tomorrow if I was going to do that.
Exactly. Well, that's kind of, we could do that for you. The Eddie Trunk solo album would be huge, by the way.
Well, let me tell you guys something real quick on this, because I've been talking about it. And the artists that are all real love me for it. The artists that are not all real are either silent or hate me for it. But here's the thing. So I said on the air, because I admit I can't play a note and I can't sing, can't do anything. But if nobody cares about paying for a live show and it not being live, I'm going to tour. And I'm going to go out and I'm going to put on a nice outfit and I'm going to sing and play great because I can do this.
Yeah, exactly.
Here's the thing.
I'll be transparent. I'll be transparent that everything you're hearing is on tracks. But if the band you paid $200 for did that and you didn't care, why do you care about me? And Tom Kiefer, who loves that I'm on this kick because he's as real as it gets, Tom Kiefer has already offered to write my songs and record.
There you go, right there, folks. Live 2020.
You'll be like
Live 2020. Eddie Tract. Buy your tickets now.
Eddie Tract.
He just gave me the name.
Eddie Tract. Love it.
Perfect. I got the T-shirt made up.
Okay, but if you have an artist that is a legacy artist or a band or whatever, and they can't do the notes like they used to do, would you rather hear them struggle the whole show and you're constantly like, oh my God, or would you rather hear the melodies being, like
helped?
Yeah, I mean, in the end, in the end, the audience just wants a good time, right? I mean, there are guys like you and me that just want to hear something that's totally live. But in the end, the crowd has a good time. They all are punching air for the big melodies and the high notes. What do you think about that?
I think if you have an artist that can't do it anywhere close to what they once did, it's time to stop. Simple as that. I love sports. And my favorite athletes, I'm a New York Giants fan. I wish Lawrence Taylor was still sacking quarterbacks, but he can't do it anymore. And he knew when the time was up. There's plenty of other things they can do in their career. You can figure something out. A lot of these guys don't have to work another day in their life. But mailing it in, I'm a big believer, Corey. And again, people can have differing opinions. It's just my opinion. I'm not saying I'm the law. But as a fan, I would rather see the artists I love end when that old quote, don't stay too long at the party, and end respectfully with dignity, then run it into the ground and it be a shell of what it once was. You just had Andy on a little while ago, and, like everybody, we all love Rush. Yeah. I don't think the band went out in a more classy way than Rush ever. Like the way they ended playing their history backwards and forwards in that stage. Yeah. It was the best I had heard Geddy sound in a long time singing. I went to see them in Denver. I asked Geddy about it. He had worked on it. He changed his diet. He said it really helped him with his vocal and all of that. So it's like, there's some freaks out there we all know. Glenn Hughes, Sammy Hagar, Steven Tyler. It's rarefied air. I watched the Stones documentary last night. I mean, Mick Jagger's like friggin' almost 80. He's still incredible. Yeah. So if you're blessed with that, great. Or do what Aerosmith does, where they've got a guy that helps them. It's a human being. He's there. He's on the keys. Tyler introduces him. Have a human do it. There's no shame in that. Add a couple people. But I just don't want to hear electronics.
And I think further to that too, Aerosmith,
I think that's
like
respectable.
Said, is in the position where they can carry an entourage of that size too. I mean, obviously a lot of bands can't do that, but so
true, yeah.
I saw here's something we can all bond on. I think last night I came across a Kiss show on YouTube from '76.
Yeah.
January '76, the Alive tour.
Sure.
it was whoever was off mic, and it drifted. Yeah. Whoever's guitar hit off their knee, you heard it. Whoever missed it, it was beautiful. It was the greatest thing I ever heard. It made me feel like I was at a real concert. It was great.
There is something visceral about that whole, like everything you just said right there, because, you know, watching a live rock band, you know, that means that a string might break, or that means you might go out of tune, and that's part of the fun of it. I think that, you know, it's probably asking a lot, because 9 times out of 10, the audience is not super knowledgeable in like the technicality of music, so they're just watching a show. So if you come out,
Todd. Let's be honest. I mean, 90% of the time, people don't even know who's in the band. Like Corey was saying, have a beer and hear the hits and party in the parking lot and go home. They have no idea what they saw.
Well, that's true. I mean, as things get on and we have like a lot of lineup changes and all these different things, a lot of people don't even care or notice. They just came to hear, you know, that song that I loved from high school, and that's it. And I suppose that, you know, because guys like you and me and a handful of other people aren't as invested in this at like full Star Wars, Star Trek nerd level rock and roll. And most people are just kind of like, I want to go see the show because I love these songs, and then I want to go home. And I don't need to hear everybody's opinion on it. So at the end of the day, the percentage of guys like us is really low. And I understand. I've been in the same boat as you. It's like, I know, because I can voice my opinion all the time, but I know that the general consensus is like, I had a good time. I met some chick at the show, you know, or whatever, you know, and that's the end of it. Yeah.
It ties into my point too about who's in the band. Like, look, I host a national radio show, as most people know, every day on Sirius XM. I'm on every day talking rock music. And it's great because it broadcasts to all of American Canada. And I get a vibe and a read from people in the smallest markets to the biggest markets on what they're thinking and their honest views on shows and who's in the band and who's not. And I mean, there's a lot of confusion out there. There's people that don't even know, but there's multiple versions of the same band using a name. Who's in the band this week, who isn't. We all know every band is built around 1 or 2 star personalities that everybody knows and recognizes. And after that, it's like all bets are off. But I understand you and us on this band, probably people watching this, we care, we know. But yeah, to the average person, I mean, they don't care. They want to go have a beer and have a good time. They couldn't care less if it has no original members. They go see Foreigner. They have no idea that there's no original guys in that band, not one. They hear hits and they're all happy.
Yeah, as long as they play them well, at least those guys they're not on tape. You know, I'll give them that. Yeah. Kelly Hansen is an amazing singer, but yeah, I know what you mean. And I think that's because we're watching, you know, like Mick Jagger is the complete anomaly. You know, I mean, as we watch these bands age out, I remember hearing that like Lynyrd Skynyrd is talking about like retiring, and I'm kind of like, because I mean, I think is it Gary Rosington is the only original member? I can't really remember. But it's kind of like, at this point, it's kind of like, well, why? Why retire? I mean, just, you know, that thing could go on for generations, you know? I mean,
my thing to Corey's point about this too is that as far as the age thing is concerned, like if you go see Alice Cooper, he's as good as he's ever been. He's got a great young band. He's still got energy on stage. He's still singing well. So to me, like the question of when do you say when only comes into play when the cracks are so visible that you're leaning on electronics or you're damaging your legacy. That's when somebody's got to get the big hook and go like that. But I'm fine with guys that I don't expect everybody to be able to hit the fastball. If I go see a guy that's up there in age, I know, okay, he's going to have to change the key. You want a great example? Ian Gillan of Deep Purple. I toured with Deep Purple a year and a half ago. I toured with them through Mexico. We did like 10 shows, and I hosted the shows. It was crazy. And I watched Ian Gillan, who's like 75, and he sang great every night. Now, did he go for Child in Time? No. If you know that song with the screams, he's never going to do that. He'll be the first to tell you those days are over for me.
Right.
But he found a way, and the band found a way to make the song sound great with him singing in a comfortable register, tuned down, whatever they got to do, and it sounded great. It was all real. There's guys that figure out a way to make it work, to stretch it. There's guys that are these freaks that just are. I mean, to me, Tyler is still the best American frontman we have and singer. And Sammy's there, and Robin Zander, and there's the Glenn Hughes. There's those freaks, and then there's guys that are just figuring out. Then there's guys that are just croaking out there, in my opinion, and damaging the legacy.
Yeah, and that especially rings true up in Canada because, like we were saying, and this obviously this show ties into a lot of Canadian rock history. You mentioned earlier, Eddie, that a lot of these guys could never work a day, again in their life. Not the same, obviously, up here because a lot of these Canadian bands didn't see the success that they did south of the border. So, we end up seeing a lot of that, and a lot of the bands that these guys cover on their albums. These guys are still out trekking and doing it, but they're all doing such a great job. I mean, I can't think of one off the top of my head that is, like you said, mailing it in or doing any injustice to it. So I guess that might just be something in the Canadian water.
There you go. I'll accept that.
Yeah, I have no problem with any replacement members in bands. Like if you got to change somebody out, as long as they're doing their own thing and making it work, and there's still some semblance of the core of the original band there, some spirit of the original band. I mean, I know everybody can't stay together forever. I don't expect that. I'm realistic.
You've been in ensemble things and worked in the business long enough to have seen looking at a band, or even say when you guys are doing the metal show, if Florentine or Jameson was a handful or couldn't get it together, you would have to make some tough calls, So and there'd be a lot of people going where's Florentine? What the and I always see that in bands, and it's kind of it's really easy for us, so impassioned about that lineup, that specific lineup, but when you've been in a band your whole life, you kind of know exactly what time it is. It's there are bus calls that need to be met. There's this guy needs to be able to play, and when all those things start to become a problem, people get replaced. It's what ends up happening. So it sucks because we all love. Well, let's have the conversation. ZZ Top and Aerosmith. Is there any other original lineup of a classic band out there?
Poison.
Yeah.
Aerosmith, ZZ Top. Those are the only two bands I can think of that are the original lineup. Poison, yeah. Actually, surprisingly, Poison is.
And Motley. Two bands totally dysfunctional in Poison and Motley, and they're still the original guys.
Their interim
but
members.
They had a lot of, and time apart and then back together. Yeah, so but that's impressive. That's still impressive that guys can pull that back together, considering, like you say, they very easily could replace these members in some fashion or another and keep going. But there's a reason why bands like Poison probably still demand a certain amount of money, because you're seeing the same four guys. Or Motley, or anybody like that.
And they all meet their own buses to stay together.
That's odd, actually.
Exactly.
We just had John on a couple weeks ago, Queen City Kids.
That's right.
Yep.
Yeah, that's an old band. Actually, speaking of which, Brent and I just did Eddie's show a few weeks back, and we did our top 5 Canadian groups. And as Brent mentioned, Eddie's so good. It's not just it's music in general that Eddie is very knowledgeable about, but we had a really good top 5, and Ed had of course, Rush was number 1, and I think Triumph was in there, Coney Hatch.
Yeah.
What was it? Was Loverboy in there? Maybe I can't remember who your.
Loverboy was definitely on the honorable mentions, but it was. I know Rush, Triumph.
You say April Wine?
April Wine. Yeah. It's always interesting because doing my radio show and having it broadcast in Canada as well as America, I get a lot of Canadian listeners, and it's always interesting, those bands, and we've talked about this before, that made the mark in America as well, but then the bands from Canada that did nothing in this country. Nobody's ever heard of them. I was listening a little bit earlier when you had Andy on, and the crazy thing for me about Coney Hatch, as he was talking earlier about the fact that they played those tours in the U.S. where they opened for Maiden and did those big shows, I got to be honest with you. I mean, even the hardcore rock fans that I know, like me, 95% of them, if I mention Coney Hatch, they have no knowledge or recollection of them at all. And it's a band that had 3 major label records released in America and did those big tours, but they just never like had a little MTV play. But to this day, trying to get people to understand the greatness of the Hatch is an uphill battle for me.
Well, you know, too, as well, that Coney Hatch is just another example of another band that had a major deal and had 3 records out that didn't go anywhere. They just happened to be from Canada. So they had that extra hurdle to try and jump through. But unfortunately, the music business is such a difficult mistress as far as, like, you know, I always say, like, when I was a kid, I remember saying, like, like, Aerosmith and Kiss and Cheap Trick, they had those first 3 albums plus, like, some kind of breakout live album to kind of flourish. And I remember the A&R guy saying to me, well, now you got about 3 weeks of your first single to kind of break out, you know? And I was like, wow, what a crazy business model this is. It's like you're barely allowed time to build any sort of groundswell audience at all. It's just kind of like you're put out there, thrown against the wall, and that one sticks. The rest just all go away. So it's
like Todd, I'd never heard of your band until, you know, Age of Electric, until I met you. You were telling me about it, because I don't think you guys, you know, got anything going in America. You know, have you guys heard of a really young new Canadian band called Broken Love?
Heard that name, yes. Yeah.
It's Broken is spelled BRKN. I just had the kid whose band it is on my show last week. His name is Justin Benlolo. He's 22. He's from Toronto.
Wow.
Great pipes. Just, you know, really killer, like, riff rock. They're signed to Spine Farm. They got a real record deal. And I was talking to him because for me, like, people ask me all the time, like, what does it take to get you to tweet about my band or play my band or talk about my band? I can't, you know, not to sound like a cliche or something, I can't be bought. Like, it has to be, and that's a courtesy to my audience too, because they know if I do it, it's just coming from a place that I really like it. And they touch it. Yeah. So this band, I heard this song called Shot Down that they just released. There's a video online. And it really was, like, really killer. And I was like, I like what these guys are doing. And I'm all about vocals, and I love the guy's voice. So I reached out to him, put him on the show. He was obviously really excited to get a shot. And we talked for a bit. And he said to me, the other 3 guys in his band, like, he wrote the record, and then he had to put a band together. And the other 3 guys in his band he got from either New York or LA. And I said, really, why didn't you go with other Canadians in that scene where you are from? And he said, because I never want to be one of those bands where people know of me in Canada but don't in America. He goes, and I thought by having some Americans in the band, it would give me a better shot at being recognized in both countries. I was like, I never thought about that, because for every one that made it both ways, there's a ton that only made it on one side.
Yeah, and I've always said, like, places like Finland or Sweden or Australia, they have scenes going on in bands that we've never heard of. You know what I mean? Like, that they're great and they're doing really well in their country. And that's just the nature of every city or every country has its own scene, and it doesn't necessarily translate beyond its own borders. It's just, I want to make sure that everybody here, though, mentions a band that Eddie should like. I kind of said I wanted to put together a mixtape. Make Eddie Trunk a virtual Canadian music mixtape. I've already mentioned bands like the Queen City Kids for you, and probably Toronto.
Well, Todd, before we go that, we wanted to do a little bit of a segment. We talked a little bit about Canadian rock. We talked a little bit about, you know, that metal show. And if it's okay with you, Eddie, we wanted to do our version of Stump the Trunk, Canadian version.
Of course.
So, okay.
Oh, don't worry. It's like you know, whatever that show is. You know, the points don't matter, and all the prizes are made up. So I think Fitzy, you want to play first?
Well, wait. We discussed this earlier, so let me get this right. Am I asking Eddie about the connection with the band Hardline?
I'm going to ask that question. You were asking. Well, I guess it doesn't matter who asked the question, but you had the other question in regards to the Heart connection to Canada.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So, do you know there's a you know the band Heart, American band Heart, probably one of their biggest songs. Do you like? You're familiar with Heart? I don't know if they're one of your favorite bands, Eddie, but
no, I like a lot of Heart stuff.
and they were sort of connected because they were from the Seattle area, close to Vancouver. But anyway, one of their biggest hits was not written by themselves, and it was actually written by a Canadian band that's near and dear to us because it's one of the bands that we've covered. We didn't cover that song, but do you know where I'm going with this? Do you know the connection?
They were very, very similar to Heart. In fact,
they were kind of like the Canadian version.
The Canadian Heart. Two girls, one on guitar, one the singer, and
was it Headpins?
No,
it was not.
Good guess though.
They toured with Headpins.
Yeah, there you go.
So here's the answer is the connection to Heart is the band Toronto, from Toronto, who had two girls in the band as well. But the song "What About Love"?
Oh, right.
Did you know that?
Oh, well, yeah. Now that, because I was thinking when you were talking about Heart, my mind immediately went to like Magic Man, Straight On Barracuda era, not Ron Nevison 80s comeback Heart. And I do know that a lot of the stuff on those records were written by other people, including What About Love and all that. Because I interviewed Nevison about, I did a big interview with Nevison a couple of years ago, and we talked about all that and how they pushed back so much about having to do other people's songs, but it was like make or break because you got to get your career back, and your songs, the way they weren't cutting it. And he was sourcing all this stuff from other places and publishing houses, and a lot of that stuff was written by others. But so I kind of remember that when you said that now.
That era was massive for those guys, for Heart, actually, yeah. The funny thing about that song is that apparently Toronto wanted nothing to do with it or something. Wasn't there a big problem with that or something?
What's the story, Corey?
Yeah.
Well, I could be wrong, but I think, the two writers, I think, who was Brian Allen and Sharon Alton, came with this song to the band, and the band didn't like it for whatever reason, and so they kind of shoved it aside. Well, then they took that song, Brian and Sharon, and they offered it to Heart, and of course it became a huge success. And I think there was I think that was kind of the beginning of the end for Toronto, was when that whole thing happened, because now these two are multi-millionaires and everybody else is still eating hand to mouth,
But Toronto is another band that you should check out, Eddie. There's a really kind of it's kind of really like good. Heart, girl singer, real rockin' stuff, kind of like, I suppose, a little Pat Benatar in there, kind of like, great guitar playing, really good band. The two main songwriters went on to write a lot of other hit songs too.
Did that band record What About Love or just write it?
Yes, and it's almost verbatim to the Heart version.
Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And the singer was every bit as good as Ann Wilson.
Because Ron Nevison told me that when they did, do you know Heart's only number one single was These Dreams? Did you know that? Like,
really?
Number one in America. The only time they hit number one in America is These Dreams. And Nevison told me that created a huge wedge between the Wilson sisters.
Because Nancy sang it.
Still, the song that Ann didn't sing becomes the number one hit, and to this day, it's like a weird thing. And by the way, while we're talking about that, you know who I loved in that band? And super underrated drummer Denny Carmassi.
Oh, sure, yeah.
He is so badass, man. I love his playing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and real quick, there's a connection to Denny Carmassi and Aldo Nova, because Denny's brother, Billy Carmassi, was the drummer on all the Aldo Nova stuff and the tours. And he was also on the Blood on the Bricks tour. Did you know that?
Denny's not Canadian, is he?
No. Denny is from San Francisco, and Billy is from San Francisco. And check this out. So I believe that first tour of Aldo Nova, so Billy was from San Fran, and maybe there was some other band members. We need to get Aldo on to confirm this, but all his whole crew and everything was from San Francisco. And if you ask Adam Day, Slash's guitar tech from, the original days, Adam, his first tours were those original Aldo Nova tours, and Adam was part of Aldo Nova. And Adam's from Northern California too. It's crazy small world. So, but Billy Carmassi was the drummer.
Yeah, I love the Coverdale Page record. I love the Heart stuff. I love, of course, the first Montrose. I mean, I also didn't know till recently he actually was in Whitesnake for a couple of years at the same time as Warren DeMartini, who I also didn't know was in Whitesnake.
Yeah, like 94 or something like that.
Yeah, really weird lineup that never played in America.
So I guess that's a long way to say that that's 1 point for Fitzy. So two. So that's Took 1, Trunk 0. So we're going to go with the second question here.
The lifeline, Andy Curran is here.
Where's Andy?
Yeah, Andy
We
Curran.
we can see Andy in the green room. He's back, but nope.
So
nobody
here's
else.
question
can see
number
him.
2 for you, Eddie. I know you're a big fan of the band Hardline, and arguably their biggest single, and probably what led to be, I guess, the peak of their fame in the in the early '90s. The song "Hot Cherie." Do you know the tie to Canada via that song?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm not a huge fan of them. I just know that song, but just for clarity purposes. But Danny Spanos.
Yeah, so Danny, that's funny because in the States, all my American friends say, "Oh, that's a Danny Spanos song." Well, he covered it too, but it was actually
was it Street Heart?
There you go.
We'll give you that one.
You know what? We talk so much about street art that you probably could just use that for your just blanket answer for everything.
So does Jericho.
It's safe to say every question on this show you can.
And you already know the Ace Frehley connection too.
Yeah, because
of course we've discussed the Ace Frehley connection with Street Heart as well.
Dancing with Danger, yeah. Every one of my answers will be either Street Heart or Kick Axe, and it'll cover.
That's pretty much going to answer all of them. Corey, go ahead.
Hey, can you guys hear me in the green room?
Yes.
Yeah, we can hear you.
I'm going to go on record as telling you that as I was growing up with Canadian bands, my favorite bass player was Spider from Street Heart.
Of course.
Unbelievable bass player.
And he's mentioning that his favorite bass player growing up was Spider, obviously, from Street Heart as well. So, yeah.
Street Heart.
That's just a band that didn't make it at all in the U.S. And the reason why I first heard their name was you mentioned earlier about all the things I've done that maybe people don't know because they know me from the TV or radio stuff. But I was an A&R guy from 86 to 90 for Megaforce. And the first artist I signed was Ace Frehley, growing up a big Kiss fan. Yeah. And when we did the second Ace record, which came out in 88, yesterday was the anniversary. That song came to us, Dancing with Danger came to us from a publishing company. It was service to us from a publisher. So for consideration for the record. And I remember when we were making that record, I had no knowledge that it had ever been recorded or was known in Canada at all. I don't think Ace did either. But then again, at that time, Ace had no knowledge that he was even a guitar player. That was so that was his first time.
The best story is when when Jericho tried to tell this story on your show, and Sebastian said, "Who cares, dude?" Shut him right down.
Jericho's still traumatized by that.
I know, he always
Sebastian shot him right down. He thought he was going to get a Canadian Brethren moment with Bach. Yeah. Bach's "Who cares, dude?"
Yeah.
It wasn't about him.
Is Sebastian? Was it Sebastian born in Jersey? What is his connection? Because I know he's got American citizen, right?
He's born in the Bahamas.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Okay. Darren is a big Sebastian Bach fan, for the record, and I know you guys are friends. But what's the story?
Well, Baz was born in the Bahamas, and then he was pretty much raised in Canada. Yeah. Canadian, definitely Canadian. I think he's dual Canadian and American citizen now, but Ontario, and then he was, he's originally in Madam X.
Mm-hmm.
And then I remember seeing Skid Row, being from New Jersey. Skid Row played the clubs in New Jersey, playing most of the stuff that's on that first record with a different singer. And they were doing good. They were a good local Jersey band. That's how they were thought of. And then one day they changed singers. As a matter of fact, I have a radio interview at the time that I did with those guys, with Snake and Rachel, and they were like, "Yeah, we're going to bring this kid down from Canada named Sebastian and try him out." And I actually have the tape of them talking about it, and nobody knew what was going on. And then I went to see him play at the place I always went to see him play by my house, and I pulled up, and it was totally different because there were lines of limos in front of the club. And I remember going up to the dressing room and going to Snake and Rachel. I'm like, who are the limos out there for? Is there an opening act or what? And they're like, "No, for us." I was like, "What's going on?" And they go, and they pointed to Sebastian, and there's this 6'5", great looking guy. They did. And he had the word got out, and it turned to bidding
Eddie, I gotta ask you, this is a completely personal question, and feel free, you don't have to answer this if you don't want to, but I had always been under the impression, just based on stuff that I had read, and was there any truth to the fact that they swapped singers because John Bon Jovi wanted him out of the band, or was that just pure speculation and rumor?
Yeah, Bon Jovi wanted who out? The guy before Baz? The guy before Baz was a guy named Matt Fallon. If you go on YouTube, there are videos, there's demos of him
people
doing.
Have their opinion, and they made the right choice, I guess. But I had always read somewhere that it was John's decision and not theirs.
I don't know. Honestly, as well as I know those guys, they never asked that. And, they're very, upfront people, so they would say if it was. Matt, the story of this guy, Matt Fallon, who, talented guy. I mean, I don't know him. I probably met him 35 years ago. I don't really know him at all or what he does now, but he was in two bands and was let go of them just before they broke. Skid Row, and the other one he was in was Anthrax.
Oh, wow.
Just before Joey Belladonna.
Bad luck.
Ouch.
So he got the double Pete Best.
Exactly.
That's worse than COVID-19.
Absolutely.
Almost. Corey, you got a question?
Yes. So I guess that's 1-1, right?
Yeah.
Oh, you're still playing the game. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
He's not letting it go.
So the band Heart, they break up, right? And some of the members from Heart go to a band called Alias, right? Remember that?
I do
remember the band
that.
Alias? Okay.
Yeah.
Two of the other members that joined these three guys were Canadians from a band that had a huge hit in the States after they were broken up. It never hit until the band broke up.
How many years after the fact was that song a hit? It's got to be 10 years, maybe 15 years.
I'm not even sure of that.
Somewhere in the 90s or something like that, this ancient Canadian 80s song became a massive hit in the States. It's the weirdest thing. And that's basically, and it's probably almost why Alias kind of started to kind of happen, I think.
Yeah, I'll even tell you the name of the song. It was called When I'm With You.
Oh!
Sheriff.
Hence the Sheriff badge on the Alias album cover.
Wow, that was impressive. Yeah.
Man, I need to get a life.
Arnold Lanny, the other guy, guitar player who kind of co-wrote the song, or perhaps wrote the song, he started a band called Frozen Ghost, and the other guys went on to be Alias.
And who was the guitar player for Frozen Ghost?
Phil X.
Phil X.
It all comes.
Every band.
This is like
he was in Triumph. He was in Triumph for a record too.
That's right.
He did. That's right.
He was the lead singer too, right?
This is going to be our new.
Yeah.
This is going to be our new show. It's going to be the
Gil
6 degrees of Canadian bacon. Everybody ties back to.
Yeah. Okay, I got one.
I think it'd be a shorter list.
Everything ties to
or these guys here.
Yeah.
Right. It's a shorter list of who Phil X didn't play with.
So, Corey, do you know if Alias became Alias?
Yeah,
because on obviously the album cover, they had the Sheriff badge there. Was that kind of like the Prince thing, just trying to dodge their deal? Were they just going under an alias because they couldn't be called Sheriff at the time, or was that?
That's an interesting theory, but I don't think. I think actually, you know what? That'd be a good. We should get Freddie. Kersey, what's his name? Freddie Kersey, the singer.
Kersey.
We should get him on the show and ask. That's a good question.
We should.
Hey, Eddie, real quick, because back to Coney Hatch. What's your favorite Coney Hatch track?
What do you think?
Devil's Deck. I think I've heard you mention Devil's Deck.
What do you think Toque should be playing for a Hatch song?
Yeah, well, when you guys mentioned it to me in the past, I've said Devil's Deck, and I know Andy said that earlier too. I mean, that's just such a kick-ass song, and the guitar playing and the singing, Carl's voice. I agree with you. I mean, Carl's voice is just unbelievable. People want to hear Carl. There's a brilliant ballad on the second album, Out of Hand, called To Feel the Feeling Again. My God, his voice on that is unbelievable. But Devil's Deck, I mean, I like all three records, but Don't Say Make Me would be pretty badass too. Yeah, the first track on the second record. But either Devil's Deck or Don't Say Make Me.
Nice.
The closest they ever came to a hit in America, Devil's Deck got some MTV early. Shake It which you met. I mean, Monkey Bars, not Shake It. Monkey.
Yeah.
No. You know what? It was Shake It. You know the song Shake It? He sings that as well. Shake the Stick, Shake It.
Okay, yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Monkey Bars was never a video or a single, but that got some play. But Shake It did a little bit, which is sort of a weird song for a single. And First Time for Everything from the second.
Oh yeah,
record.
I love that song.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I would do, if I was you guys, I'd do Devil's Deck or Don't Say Make Me.
Done and done.
Done. Well, Ed, thank you so much.
I'll make you.
Thank you for being here, Eddie. I really appreciate you being. Aren't you on like vacation right now or something?
Shane down there in the corners, like raising his hands, like
go, Shane.
My audio.
Go.
Check
Go.
1, 2.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, no, I have one for Eddie, and so I was a big Anvil fan growing up, and I know you are too. So this is probably really easy for you, but I'm interested to see if the other guys can get it. So the connection between Yngwie Malmsteen and Anvil.
Oh wow!
What?
I didn't know that there was a connection. Do you know the connection, Ed?
Did Yngwie also play with a vibrator?
A Canadian-made one.
Yes.
I don't care what the answer is. Let's just go out on that. Just kidding.
It's their 18th record, and they titled it "Finally Legal."
What's the answer, Shay?
Yeah.
Okay, so Chris Sangaritas, the producer for Anvil, produced Yngwie Malmsteen's Magnum Opus.
That's a stretch right there.
Who's the drummer? Who was the drummer on that record?
I don't know who the drummer was, but
On which record?
Mr. Shane Gullis. Shane Gullis was the drummer on that record.
Yeah.
so it was actually really cool for me because I was a big Anvil fan, and then I went to Criteria to record with Yngwie, and I heard Chris Sangaritas was producing the record. So I was like, oh my god. So I had lots of questions for
So it's
Chris.
safe to say we're at 2. Todd, you got anything that can break the tie here? We got time for a quick one more.
Honestly, I every one of these questions I have put to Ed on multiple occasions, well, except for the Yngwie Malmsteen one.
We're just going to have to
so
agree
really
that
don't
this
have
is a tie,
anything
and
new
we're
for
just
Ed.
as smart as Eddie. So it's all good. Yeah, well, let's just leave it at that.
Let's just you know what it is? That was the Tract versus Toque.
So Eddie Tracks on tour next year. So yeah, further to that, our time is up here, but we want to thank Eddie for hanging out with us for the last hour. Appreciate it. And one thing, I got you wrong on your band likes, but I do know that you like physical copies of the CDs. So I don't know if you've got the 2 CDs that these guys put out, but this will bring you right up to date.
It's just Lyle just sent it to me.
So I was going to say we're going to send these out to you. So yeah, give them a listen.
I think I got them waiting at home. I'm not at my. I'm at a weekend house I have right now. But when I get home, I'm sure they're in my mail because I know Lyle.
Listen, and yeah, we'd like to thank you for coming on. So everybody, tune in next week. Do we know who we got?
Thank you,
next
guys.
week, or are we going to wait and announce that?
So far we have Mark Holmes from Platinum Blonde.
Yeah.
Should ask the Platinum Blonde questions.
I know.
There you go. All right.
Thanks, Ed. Love you.
Love you guys. Thank you. I hope we do this at the bootlegger soon. All sitting around hanging out with Ronnie and the whole crew and Zach and everybody. Absolutely. It's just got me like missing that even more.
Awesome.
So.
Hell yeah.
Well, take care.
Hell yeah. Awesome, buddy.
Good all right, guys. Take care.
Thanks so much.
Bye.
Be safe, everybody.
All right, so that was we're still on live, awesome. By the way, guys. We're just wrapping things up here. So, anything you guys want to leave with?
Oh, where did Todd go?
I guess Todd would go to the bathroom or something.
Todd, yeah, he just left there with his smiley face online, so it's all good. Perfect exit. Okay, so tune in next week, and we'll announce our second guest in the upcoming days, and we'll talk to you guys very shortly. Leave you a little bit of hardware and street hard here, and we'll see everybody back next Tuesday.